The wind in Wyoming territory did not just blow. It hunted. It scoured the high plains with a grit that could sand the varnish off a wagon wheel or the hope out of a man's heart. On the southern ridge of the Concade Range, that wind was the only thing speaking in October of 1885. Eli Concade pulled his hat brim lower, shielding his eyes from the glare of the noon sun. He was a man built of long lines and hard angles, terrified of taking up too much space in a world that seemed determined to crush him. At 30 years old, he had mastered the art of becoming invisible. Here, alone with the red dust and the stubborn cattle, he was steady. Here, he was safe. But safety was an illusion. He straightened and looked north. The dust cloud on the horizon was not a storm. It was cattle. Thousands of them, branded with the heavy P of Harlan Pike, the Baron of the Basin. Pike was moving his herds closer to the creek that marked the disputed boundary between his empire and Eli's struggling homestead. Eli knew the math of it, and the numbers were ugly. His father had left him the land, but he had also left a mountain of debt. $400 sat unpaid at the bank in town, a sum that felt as heavy as a tombstone. Pike held leverage on that note now, having bought the debt quietly, like a snake sliding into a warm boot. The lawyer from Cheyenne had explained it a month ago, using words that felt like blows. They called Eli unfit. They called him a bachelor with no legacy, a man squatting on prime water rights with no family to hold it. If he could not prove he was building a stable household, the land courts would side with the syndicate. Pike would swallow the creek, the grazing land, and the only place Eli had ever known. He reached into his vest pocket and touched the corner of a folded letter. It was sweat-stained now, the ink likely blurring, but he had memorized the words. It was a contract, cold and precise, a marriage by proxy. He had sent the money he could barely spare to a service in Tucson, a desperate gamble made in the deep silence of a winter night. He needed a wife. The law required a household. The shame of it burned him hotter than the sun. Eli was a man who could gentle a wild colt without a rope. He could track a stray steer through 3 days of hard shale. Yet the thought of speaking to a woman made his throat close up. He flinched at raised voices. He walked into the general store sideways, trying to make himself invisible. And now he was riding to meet a stranger who had agreed to marry him for a ticket out of the borderlands. By the time the roofs of Red Rock broke the horizon, the sky had turned on him. The relentless sun was swallowed by a bruised purple bank of clouds rolling in from the mountains. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 10 minutes. Eli ticked his horse at the hitching rail outside the station office. The town was busy. Men shouted over the rising wind, securing loose shutters. A few cowboys from the Pike outfit lounged on the porch of the saloon, their laughter sharp and jagged. "Storm is coming, Concade," the station master shouted. "Stage is late. I will wait," Eli said. His voice was a low rumble, rusty from disuse. The rain arrived as a curtain of ice-cold needles driving sideways. When the stagecoach finally lunged out of the gloom, the horses were frothing. The door swung open. A salesman tumbled out, running for the hotel. Then a pause. A boot appeared, small, worn leather, cracked at the heel. Clarivale stepped down into the mud. She did not run for cover. She stood by the wheel for a moment, steadying herself. She wore a dress of dark gray wool that had seen better years. A shawl was wrapped tight around her shoulders. She looked up, scanning the street, not with the wide eyes of a lost girl, but with the sharp, darting gaze of a hawk searching for a snake. She was thin. That was Eli's first thought. She looked like something the wind had whittled down to the bone. Eli forced his feet to move. He stepped off the boardwalk, took off his hat, and let the freezing rain soak his hair. "Miss Vale," he asked. He hated how his voice cracked. She turned. Her eyes were green, the color of moss in a deep canyon, and they held no warmth. They measured him. She looked at his hands, checking for fists. She looked at his belt, checking for a gun. She looked at his mouth, checking for a sneer. "Mr. Concade," she said. Her voice was low, raspy. "I am Clara." He nodded, unable to meet her gaze. He gestured toward his wagon. "I have the buckboard. We should go. The creek rises fast." Behind them, two churchwomen stood under the awning of the mercantile, their skirts gathered up to avoid the splash. "That is her," one whispered loud enough to cut through the rain. "The one from the border. References from a saloon keeper." Can you imagine? Like a border trash, the other murmured. No respectable woman lists a place like that. He must be desperate, Eli flinched. The words hit him harder than a physical blow. Clara Vale merely tightened her grip on her small, battered bag. Her expression did not change. I am ready, she said. Two broken strangers, one desperate arrangement, in a town that had already decided their worth. This is their story. The ride to the ranch was an ordeal of silence and mud. The wagon lurched through ruts that were rapidly turning into small rivers. The wind howled, shaking the canvas cover, but the cold seeped through every gap. Eli sat hunched over the reins, focusing entirely on the ears of the horses. He wanted to say something. He wanted to tell her that the house was dry, that he had food, that he was sorry the town was cruel. But the words died in his throat, choked off by fear that anything he said would be wrong. Clara sat with her hands folded in her lap. She watched the landscape roll by. It was waste, empty, and terrifying. In the border town there had been noise, people, the constant crush of humanity. Here, there was nothing but sagebrush and gray sky. If she screamed here, the sound would simply be eaten by the wind. She looked at the man beside her. He was large, broad-shouldered. He had not looked her in the eye since the station. Was he angry? Was he disgusted by what he had bought? She had learned to read men by the way they held their liquor and the way they used their hands. This man held the reins with a gentle touch. He did not whip the horses when they stumbled. He spoke to them in low, soothing sounds that the wind nearly stole. That was good, or perhaps it was a trick. The quiet ones were sometimes the worst when the door was closed. They arrived at the homestead as the last of the daylight bled out of the sky. The ranch house was small, a simple structure of weathered timber and stone, huddled against a rise in the land for protection from the north wind. Eli pulled the wagon up to the porch. We are here. Clara climbed down before he could help her. She followed him inside. The main room was warm. Eli had left the fire banked, and the smell of wood smoke and coffee hung in the air. It was clean, Clara noted. The floor was swept. There were no piles of dirty clothes, no empty bottles. It was sparse, almost like a monk's cell. A table, two chairs, a stove. I put your things in there, Eli said, pointing to a door on the left. I sleep in the loft. He was establishing distance. Clara relaxed slightly, though she kept her shoulders braced. She walked to the door and pushed it open. The room was small. There was a narrow bed with a handmade quilt, a washstand, and a small chest of drawers. On the shelf above the bed, there was a small wooden carving. Clara stepped closer. It was a horse whittled from pine, clumsy but loving. Beside it lay a ribbon, faded red, the silk fraying at the edges. She reached out to touch the ribbon. Do not. Eli's voice came from the doorway, sharp and sudden. Clara jerked her hand back, spinning around. Eli stood there, his face pale, his eyes wide with a panic that looked like anger. He crossed the room in two long strides, grabbed the ribbon and the wooden horse, and shoved them into the top drawer of the chest. He slammed the drawer shut. I am sorry, he said, his back to her. Those are old. I should have cleared them. It is all right, Clara said, her voice steady, though her heart was hammering. I did not mean to pry. Supper, Eli said, the word strangled. I will make supper. He fled the room. They ate in silence. Stew made of venison and potatoes. It was hot and filling. Clara ate methodically, scraping the bowl clean. She did not know when the next meal would come. Survival had taught her to never leave food on a plate. Night had fallen completely. The oil lamp cast long, wavering shadows. Eli stood up and washed the dishes, his back to her. Clara watched his shoulders. The tension in the room was rising. She knew what this was. She knew the arrangement. She was a wife. A wife had duties. In the saloon, she had seen what happened to women who did not pay their debts, who did not smile when they were told to smile. She had survived by being useful, by being invisible, and by understanding the transaction. He needed a wife to keep his land. She needed a home to keep from starving. He had paid for her ticket. He had fed her. Now the bill was due. She stood up. Her legs felt weak. She walked to the center of the room. Mr. Concade. Eli turned, wiping his hands on a towel. He looked exhausted. Eli, he said softly. Please call me Eli. Eli, she repeated. She took a breath. She reached up and unbuttoned the top button of her high collar. Her fingers were trembling, but she forced them to work. She had to show him she was willing. Eli went still. He dropped the towel. Clara, what are you doing? I know what is expected, she said. Her voice was thin, brittle. I am your wife now. I want to be a good wife. She took a step closer. He did not move. I can, she started, then faltered. She looked at his belt buckle because she could not look at his eyes. She gestured vaguely, a halting, humiliating offer. She waited for him to grab her, to laugh, or to tell her to get on her knees. No. The word was a rough croak. Clara flinched. She opened her eyes. Eli had backed away until he hit the edge of the stove. He was trembling. His hands were held up, palms out, as if she were the one with a knife. No, he said again, louder. Do not. Please. I do not understand, Clara whispered. I thought you wanted... I know where you came from, Eli said. His voice was shaking. I know you had to survive, but you are not that here. You are not a thing I bought. He ran a hand through his hair, gripping the strands tight. My father, he said. He took what he wanted. He was a man who thought the world owed him everything, including the women in his house. I am not him. I swear to you, Clara, I am not him. He looked at her then, and the raw vulnerability in his face took her breath away. He was terrified. Not scared of her, scared of himself, scared of the potential for cruelty that lived in all men. I will not touch you, he said, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper. Not until you choose it. Not until you want it. If that takes a year or 10 years or forever, you are safe here. Do you understand? You are safe. Clara stood frozen. The speech confused her. Kindness was a foreign language. Cruelty she understood. Cruelty had rules. You could navigate cruelty, but this gentle, terrified restraint. She looked at his large hands, still held up in surrender. Something inside her, some tight, coiled spring that she had been holding together for years, suddenly snapped. It was not a sob. It was a shudder that started in her knees and rolled up her spine. I do not know how to be safe, she admitted. Eli moved then. He did not grab her. He stepped forward slowly, telegraphing every movement. He reached out and awkwardly, hesitantly placed his hands on her upper arms. His grip was light, barely there. We will learn, he said. We will learn together. The warmth of his hands seeped through the thin wool of her dress. Clara looked up at him. He was not looking at her body. He was looking at her face, searching for fear. She leaned forward, just an inch. It was a surrender, but not the kind she had prepared for. She rested her forehead against his chest. He smelled of rain and sawdust and soap. He stiffened for a second, then slowly his arms came around her. He held her. He did not grope, he just held her, forming a wall between her and the world. The lamp flickered. The shadows lengthened. For the first time in her life, Clara Vale closed her eyes and did not count the seconds until she could escape. The days that followed were consumed by work. The Wyoming wind did not bargain. It took what it wanted, stripping the moisture from the soil and the softness from the skin. For Clara, the first month on the Concade Ranch was a lesson in abrasion. Her hands, once accustomed to the smooth glass of whiskey tumblers and the velvet of worn cards, were now mapped with blisters that broke and bled and hardened into calluses. She woke before the sun. The mornings were deceptively beautiful, the sky a bruised purple that lightened to a pale, freezing blue. But the air bit deep. She hauled water from the pump near the barn, the bucket handle digging into her palms. She chopped wood, her swing awkward at first, the axe head bouncing dangerously off the knots until she learned to read the grain. The landscape was brutal. One afternoon, a dust storm rose up like a solid wall of copper, blotting out the sun and turning the noon sky to midnight. Clara had been caught near the chicken coop. The grit filled her nose and mouth, blinding her. She had dropped to her knees, covering her head, waiting for it to pass. When the wind finally died, she stood up, shook the dust from her skirts, and finished gathering the eggs. She refused to complain. To complain was to admit weakness, and in her experience, weakness attracted predators. Eli watched her. He did not hover, but he was always there on the periphery of her vision. He taught her with a quiet patience that unnerved her. In the border town, men taught with shouts or the back of a hand. If you did it wrong, you were punished. Eli was different. "You are cinching it too tight," he said one morning in the barn. Clara jumped, dropping the leather strap. She backed up against the stall door, her breath hitching. She waited for the reprimand. Eli stood by the horse's shoulder. He did not look at Clara. He ran a hand down the horse's neck. "If you pinch her skin, she will buck. She is not mean, just sensitive. Like us." He gestured for Clara to step forward. "Here, slide your fingers under the girth. If you can fit 2 fingers flat, it is right." Clara stepped closer, her heart hammering. She reached out, sliding her hand between the warm horsehair and the stiff leather. Eli's hand was inches from hers. He did not grab her. He did not correct her posture. He simply waited. "It fits," she whispered. "Good," Eli said. "You have a gentle touch, Clara. The animals like that." He walked away to gather the bridles. Clara stared at his back. His patience felt like a trap. No man was this patient unless he was saving up for a truly terrible explosion. She kept her guard up, watching his hands, watching his eyes, waiting for the concave temper she had heard rumors about. But the days bled into weeks, and the explosion did not come. One evening, Eli sat by the fire, mending a tear in one of Clara's work gloves. He used a thick needle and heavy thread, his large fingers moving with surprising delicacy. Clara was at the stove, stirring a stew. She watched him. "My father," Eli said suddenly into the quiet. He was a loud man. He liked to hear his own voice, and he liked the sound of his fist hitting things. Clara stopped stirring. "He used to hit my mother," Eli continued, not looking up from the glove, not when he was drunk, when he was sober. He liked the control. He pulled the thread tight, biting off the end. One day when I was 16, he raised a shovel to her because she had let the fire go out. I hit him. I took a pitchfork handle and I hit him. I broke his arm, and then I hit him again, and again. He looked up at her then, and his eyes were full of a terrified grief. I wanted to kill him, Clara. I stood over him, and I felt good. I felt strong." He paused, his voice dropping. I stopped. "But the feeling, it was there. The concave blood. It is violent. That is why I am quiet. That is why I do not fight unless I have to. I am afraid that if I start, I will not be able to stop. I am afraid I am him." Clara left the stove. She walked to his chair and took the mended glove from his hand. She looked at the stitching. It was neat, even, and strong. "A man who is afraid of his own violence is not a monster, Eli," she said softly. "A monster does not care." She put the glove on. It fit perfectly. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, unable to speak, and went outside to check the horses. That night, the fear between them began to shift into something else, something fragile, something that felt dangerously like trust. The attacks from Pike began with paper before they turned to violence. A week after Clara arrived, a sheriff's deputy rode out to the ranch. He was a slick man with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He handed Eli a folded document. "Notice of boundary dispute," the deputy said, chewing on a toothpick. "An illegal use of the creek. Mr. Pike's lawyers say you are drawing water from the upper fork. That belongs to the syndicate." "My father filed that water claim 30 years ago," Eli said, holding the paper without looking at it. "Paperwork got lost," the deputy shrugged. "Or maybe it was never right. Either way, you have 2 weeks to cease drawing water or face a fine. A big one." He tipped his hat to Clara, who was watching from the porch. "Ma'am, you look familiar. Did you ever work up in Deadwood?" "No," Clara said coldly. "My mistake." The deputy smirked. "You just have that look." He rode off, leaving a cloud of dust and a sense of encroaching doom. Pike was tightening the noose. Without the creek water, the herd would not survive the summer. 3 nights later, the moon was a sliver of bone in the sky. Eli woke to the sound of lowing cattle. Not the contented chewing of the cud, but the distressed, confused bellows of a herd on the move. He was out of bed and pulling on his boots before his eyes were fully open. "What is it?" Clara asked from the darkness. "Cattle. Wrong place. Sounds like the South Ridge." They saddled the horses in the dark. They rode out with rifles, the cool night air rushing past them. When they reached the South Ridge, the disaster was plain even in the gloom. The wire fence, which Eli had strung only a month ago, had been cut. Not broken by a charging bull, but cut cleanly with wire cutters, the strands curled back like dead vines. Through the camp, 50 head of cattle had wandered into the rough country of the Devil's Wash, a tangle of ravines and loose shale that could break a leg as easily as a twig. They are pushing them toward the Badlands, Eli shouted over the wind. For the next 4 hours, they rode like demons. The terrain was treacherous. Shale slid under the horses' hooves. Eli drove his mare down steep embankments, whistling sharply to turn the stragglers. Clara rode the flank. She was exhausted, her legs screaming from the grip on the saddle, but she did not slow down. By dawn, they had turned the herd back. The cattle were spooked, but they were on concave grass. Eli slid from his saddle near the cut fence. He stumbled when his boots hit the ground, his knees buckling from sheer exhaustion. They want to wear us down, Eli rasped. They know they cannot win in court yet, so they will kill us by inches. No sleep, no safety. We fixed it, Clara said, handing him his canteen. We brought them back. This time, Eli said. Next time they might run them off a cliff. The sound of hooves approaching made them both freeze. 3 riders appeared on the rise. At the front was Silas Vance, Harlan Pike's foreman. He was a man built like a barrel with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. "Morning, Concade," Vance called out. "Looks like you had some trouble." "Trespassers," Eli said calmly. "Cut my fence, is that so?" Vance rode closer. "Shame. Maybe your cows just know where the better water is. The creek on Mr. Pike's land is flowing real nice. The creek is common water," Eli said, "and the boundary is 5 miles south." "You know that, Vance? I know what the map says today," Vance said, leaning on his saddle horn. "Maps change, owners change. Mr. Pike is a patient man, but he hates to see good land wasted on a man who cannot hold it." Vance's eyes flicked to Clara. He looked her up and down with a slow, insolent stare. "And he surely hates to see a lady working so hard. Maybe she would be happier in town. I hear she has friends there." Eli's knuckles turned white on the rifle stock. "Get off my land," Eli said. His voice was not loud, but it vibrated with a deadly frequency. "I am on the public road, neighbor. Just passing through." Vance turned his horse. "Fix that fence good, Concade. Be a shame if it happened again tonight." As they rode away, Eli lowered the rifle. He stood staring after them, his chest heaving. He had chosen strategy. He had chosen not to give Pike the excuse of a shooting war. But Clara could see the cost of it. The restraint was eating him alive. That night, Clara prepared for bed with a ritual that broke Eli's heart to watch. She checked the heavy bolt on the front door twice. She checked the shutters on the windows. When she climbed into bed, she slid a small, sharp paring knife under her pillow. She did it casually, as if she were tucking away a handkerchief. Eli sat on the edge of the bed, watching her. "You should not have to sleep with a knife. I sleep better with it," Clara said simply. "It is not because I do not trust you, Eli. It is because I know the world." Eli did not try to talk her out of it. He simply nodded, blew out the lamp, and lay down beside her. He reached for her hand in the dark, interlacing their fingers. He squeezed tight, and she squeezed back. It was an acknowledgement of their shared reality. They were the only 2 people in the world they could trust. 2 days later, the war came directly to Clara. Eli was working on the windmill. Clara had walked down to the creek to wash the laundry. It was a 1/4 mile from the house, obscured by a line of cottonwoods. She was scrubbing a shirt against the washboard when the birds in the trees suddenly went silent. Clara straightened. She wiped her hands on her apron. She listened. The rustle of the brush was behind her. She spun around, reaching for the small knife she now carried in her pocket. But she was too slow. A rope hissed through the air. A lasso loop dropped over her shoulders and tightened instantly, pinning her arms to her sides. She was jerked off her feet, dragged through the gravel and mud. She did not scream. She kicked. She twisted her body, fighting the rope. She was hauled up against the trunk of a cottonwood tree. A man stepped out of the brush. He was wearing a bandana pulled up over his nose. "This is a warning," the man whispered. He stepped close, smelling of tobacco and horse sweat. He pulled the rope tighter, the rough hemp burning into her neck. "Tell your husband to sell. Tell him the next time the rope goes over a branch, not around your arms." He drew a knife. Clara stopped breathing. He brought the knife up and slashed it across her arm, shallow but long. A line of bright red blood bloomed on her sleeve. "Sell," he hissed. He shoved her hard against the tree, loosened the rope, and vanished back into the brush. Clara sank to the ground. She touched her throat. It was throbbing. She looked at her arm. The cut was stinging, but it was not deep. It was precise. It was a message. She grabbed the knife she had dropped and ran back to the house. When Eli saw her, he dropped his tools and ran. He caught her as she stumbled up the porch steps. He saw the blood on her sleeve. He saw the angry red welt circling her neck. His face went terrifyingly blank. "Who?" he asked. "Masked," Clara gasped. "One man, down by the creek. He said to sell." Eli did not speak. He helped her inside while he sat her down and cleaned the cut on her arm with trembling hands. He put a cold compress on her throat. He was gentle, efficient, and utterly silent. Then he stood up. He walked to the gun cabinet. He took out his Winchester repeating rifle. He took out the heavy Colt revolver. He began to load them. "Eli," Clara said. He did not answer. He shoved cartridges into the loading gate of the rifle. Click, click, click. "Eli, look at me," Clara said. He turned. His eyes were not the eyes of the man she loved. They were the eyes of a stranger. Cold, empty, filled with a singular murderous purpose. "I am going to kill them," he said. His voice was flat. "I am going to ride to Pike's ranch and I am going to kill Vance. And then I am going to find Pike and I am going to kill him. I had done waiting." He turned for the door. "No," Clara cried out, stumbling up from the chair. She ran to him, grabbing his arm. He was like a stone statue. He did not stop. He dragged her a few steps before stopping at the door. "Let go, Clara. They hurt you. They put a rope on you. If you go there," Clara said, her voice shaking, "you will die. They have 20 men. You will kill one, maybe two, and then they will cut you down. And I will be alone. I cannot let this stand," Eli shouted, the control finally snapping. He slammed his hand against the door frame. "I am a man. I am supposed to protect you. If I do not kill him, I am nothing. I am weak." He slumped against the door, the rifle clattering to the floor. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders heaving with dry, tearing sobs. "I am weak. I am just a coward who hides behind fences." Clara picked up the rifle and set it aside. She walked to him. She reached up and pulled his hands away from his face. "Look at me," she commanded. He looked at her, his face wet with tears of shame. "You are not weak," she said fiercely. "Pike is weak. Vance is weak. They use power to hurt because they are small." She touched his chest. "You have the power to kill, and you choose not to. That is not cowardice, Eli. That is the hardest thing a man can do." She pressed her forehead against his. "You did not become him. You did not become your father. You stayed you, and that is the man I need. I do not need a dead hero. I need a living husband." Eli shuddered, the tension draining out of him. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her neck. "I wanted to," he whispered. "God, Clara, I wanted the blood." "I know," she soothed, stroking his hair. "I know, but you stayed." They stayed like that for a long time, the shadows lengthening across the floor. Later in the darkness, Clara revealed her secret. She slipped out of bed and padded across the cold floor to her trunk. She knelt and opened the false bottom she had constructed years ago. Inside lay a small bundle of papers. She pulled out a letter. The ink was faded, the paper brittle. It was from Sarah, the girl who had been like a sister to her in the border town. Sarah had found a ledger. She had written that Pike was moving stolen cattle through the border, rebranding them, and using a network of corrupt officials to hide the money. She had written that she was going to turn the ledger over to a federal marshal. 2 days later, Sarah was dead, a stray bullet in a bar fight. But Clara had seen the man who started the fight. He was on Pike's payroll. Clara looked at Eli, sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. She had proof. Not enough to convict, maybe, but enough to start a fire. If she used it, if she brought this into the light, Pike would stop at nothing. She folded the letter and put it back. She would not hide it forever. But for tonight, she would let him sleep. The peace did not last. 2 days later, the town held its annual Founders' Day picnic. Eli said they could not ignore it if they wanted to maintain their standing as a legitimate household. They rode into town dressed in their Sunday best. Clara wore a dress of dark blue that she had altered to fit her slender frame. As they walked through the crowd, the atmosphere shifted. The whispering was louder this time. A man stepped out from the crowd near the bandstand. He was older, with a scarred face and eyes that looked like dead fish. "Well, well," the man said, his voice carrying over the fiddle music. "If it is not Clara, or should I say Red?" Clara froze. She knew him. "Looking Glass Saloon, 5 years ago. I wondered where you ran off to." The man grinned, looking at the crowd. "Folks, you have got a celebrity in your midst. This here is the finest entertainment the border ever produced. Cost me $2 for an hour." "Did it not, Red?" The crowd gasped. The silence that followed was absolute. $2, the man laughed. "And she was worth every penny. Tell me, Concade, did you get a discount for the wedding ring?" Eli went white, not red, but a deathly, chalky white. Clara stood there, the sun beating down on her, feeling the judgment of the town settle on her like a shroud. She saw the churchwomen nodding, their suspicions confirmed. She saw the men smirking. She looked at Eli. He was not looking at the man anymore. He was looking at her. And in that moment, with the town staring and the lie hanging in the air like smoke, Clara wondered if love was enough to survive the truth. "Let us go," Eli said. His voice was dead. He did not hit the man. He did not defend her honor. He turned around and walked toward the horses. Clara stood alone for a second, the laughter of the crowd ringing in her ears. Then she turned and followed him, her head high, her heart breaking into dust. The drive home was silent. Clara waited for Eli to speak, to accuse her, and to tell her to pack her things, to say he had made a mistake. He said nothing. When they reached the ranch, he unhitched the horses in the gathering dark. Clara went inside and stood by the cold stove, too tired to start a fire. The door opened. Eli stood in the doorway, his silhouette large against the twilight. "Is it true," he asked quietly, "what that man said?" Clara did not look away. "I never sold myself," she said, "but I worked where men bought women. I poured their drinks. I smiled when they told me to smile. I saw things. I survived things." She took a breath. "If you want me to leave, I will understand." Eli walked into the room. He stopped in front of her. "I married you knowing you came from a hard place," he said slowly. "I did not ask for details because I did not think they mattered." He paused. "They still do not matter." Clara stared at him. "Those people in town," Eli continued, his voice hardening, "they do not know what it takes to survive. They have never had to choose between their pride and their next meal. I have, and I will not let their small minds decide your worth." He took her hands. "You are my wife, Clara. The only woman brave enough to stand beside me against Pike. The only person who has ever told me I was not my father. I do not care what you did before. I care what we do now." Clara's vision blurred with tears. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you not hate me?" "Because I see you," Eli said simply. "I see who you are, not who they say you are." She broke then. The wall she had built around her heart crumbled, and she collapsed against him, sobbing. He held her through the storm, his arms steady, his heartbeat strong beneath her ear. When the tears were spent, they sat together at the table. Clara spread out the letters and the pages she had saved from Sarah's ledger. "This is what I have been hiding," she said. "Sarah found Pike's records. He is running stolen cattle through the border. He is bribing judges. He had Sarah killed when she tried to expose him." Eli studied the papers, his face grim. "This could destroy him. If we can get it to the right judge," Clara said. "The circuit judge in Cheyenne, Judge Atherton. He is known to be hard but honest." "Cheyenne is 4 days' ride," Eli said. "And we cannot leave the ranch undefended." "We cannot stay here and wait to be burned out," Clara countered. They decided to try the local sheriff first. Perhaps he was merely incompetent, not corrupt. It was a mistake. Eli rode into town to file a report about the fence cutting. He returned 3 hours later, his face gray. "Miller would not take the report," Eli said. "He said without proof of who cut the wire, it is just wear and tear." He paused. "Then I saw him in the back office drinking whiskey from a bottle with a distinct blue label, the same whiskey Pike imports for his private stock." "He is bought," Claire said. She did not look surprised. We have no law here. That night, Pike ended the waiting game. Eli fell into a restless sleep. Clara lay awake, the pain in her arm, a sharp reminder of the stakes. She saw the light before she smelled the smoke. It was a flickering orange glow reflecting off the low clouds. Eli, Clara screamed, shaking him awake. They ran to the window. The stackyard where Eli had stored the winter hay was an inferno. The fire was massive, fueled by the dry grass and the oil that must have been poured over it. The flames leaped 30 feet into the air. The hay, Eli whispered. It is gone. Without the hay, the herd would starve before January. The bank would foreclose on the loan. The ranch was effectively dead. Pike had not just sent a warning this time. He had started the countdown. Eli turned from the window. His face was no longer terrified. It was cold and clear, stripped of all doubt. Get the letters, Eli said. Pack the saddlebags. We ride now. They left under the new moon, riding hard through the frozen darkness. The terrain was treacherous. They camped in hollows, sleeping back to back under a canvas tarp. When they finally rode into Cheyenne 3 days later, they were exhausted, windburned, and desperate. They found the office of Marcus Thorne, the district attorney. The clerk tried to turn them away, sneering at Clara's travel-stained dress. Eli's hands slammed onto the desk. My wife is not a delivery, Eli said. She is Mrs. Eli Kincaid, and you will look her in the eye when you speak to her. The inner door opened. Marcus Thorne stepped out. He was a man who looked like he had not slept in a week. What is the noise? Thorne asked. We have evidence of fraud and theft against Harlan Pike, Eli said, and we have proof of judicial corruption in Red Rock. Thorne listened as Clara laid out the story. She showed him the ledger pages. It is a pattern, Thorne said, but this is hearsay. A jury will look at your history. Pike's lawyers will tear you apart, unless we have a corroborating witness. There is one, Clara said. A girl named Molly. She worked at the Looking Glass. She was there the night Sarah was killed. Find her, Thorne said. If I have 2 witnesses, I can get a subpoena for Pike's private records. They found Molly behind a boarding house, pinning wet sheets to a line. When she saw Clara, her face went white with fear. He will kill me, Molly whispered. He has eyes everywhere. He is killing us anyway, Clara said. If we do not stop him, there will be nowhere left to run. Molly looked at Eli, then back at Clara. I finished my shift at 6, she said finally. I will come to the lawyer's office. But then I am getting on a train west. I will not stay. Thank you, Clara said. They walked back toward the main street, a fragile hope growing. It was shattered before they reached the corner. A man, wearing a sheriff's badge, stepped out of the barber shop, flanked by 2 deputies. I have a warrant here for a Clara Vale, the deputy said. Issued out of Red Rock this morning. Charged as grand larceny, theft of a diamond brooch from a Mr. Silas Vance. That is a lie, Clara said. I have never stolen anything. Eli's hand dropped to his gun. The deputies put their hands on their own weapons. If you draw that gun, the deputy said, we will shoot you down right here. And then she hangs for sure. Eli stood on the precipice. Eli, Clara said sharply. She stepped out from behind him. She put her hand on his chest, right over his heart. Do not do it. I will not run. I will not give them the satisfaction. She looked at the deputy. I am innocent. I will face the magistrate. The deputy smirked and slapped handcuffs on her wrists. The jail cell was cold and smelled of vomit. Eli sat on the bench outside the bars, refusing to leave. When Thorne arrived, he looked grim. They are moving fast. They want a preliminary hearing now. They want to discredit her before she can testify against Pike. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread that a fallen woman was on trial. When Clara was let in, the shackles clinking, a ripple of laughter went through the room. She wore her travel-stained gray dress. She held her head up, but her face was burning. The prosecutor was a slick man from Denver, paid for by the syndicate. Is it true, Miss Vale, he paced in front of the witness stand, that you worked at the Looking Glass Saloon? Yes, Clara said. Speak up, the judge barked. Yes, Clara said louder. And what were your duties there? The prosecutor sneered. Did they involve hospitality? I served drinks, and for a price, did you offer other comforts? Thorne stood up. Objection. Relevance. It goes to character, Your Honor. The prosecutor smiled. A woman who sells herself will certainly sell a lie. The gallery laughed. Clara gripped the rail of the stand. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to sink into the floor. She looked at Eli. He was sitting in the front row. He was not looking at the floor. He was looking at her. His eyes were fierce, filled with a love that saw past the dirt and the shame. He nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible motion. "Stand," it said. Clara took a breath. She stopped shaking. "I survived," Clara said clearly. The room went quiet. "I did what I had to do to eat. I lived in a place where men like you came to do things they would not do in front of their wives. I saw their secrets. I saw their cruelty." She turned to the judge. "I did not steal a brooch, but I saw Harlan Pike steal a life. I saw his men shoot a girl named Sarah because she found a ledger. I am not here to hide who I was. I am here to tell you who he is." The silence was absolute. Eli was called to the stand next. "My wife is the bravest person I know," Eli said. "She has worked my land until her hands bled. She has faced starvation and threats. She did not steal. This warrant is a lie to protect a thief who is stealing the water from every ranch in this county." Judge Atherton peered over his spectacles. "The warrant for the brooch is suspicious. The evidence is thin. However, the accusation against Mr. Pike is grave. You claim there is a ledger." "Yes," Clara said. "Sarah found it. It lists the bribes. It lists the rebranded cattle." "Where is this ledger?" the judge asked. "Pike has it, or he destroyed it." "I cannot issue a ruling on a missing book," the judge said. "I will recess this hearing until tomorrow morning. If you can produce this ledger or a witness who has seen it, I will dismiss the charges against you and open an inquiry into Pike. If not, you will stand trial for larceny." They were released on bail, paid by Thorne. Outside the courthouse, the news was devastating. "Molly never came," Thorne said. "She must have run," Eli said. "We have no witness and no ledger." "Pike is in town," Thorne said. "He stays at the Cattlemen's Club. He has a private suite on the second floor. If the ledger exists, it is in his safe. We cannot just walk in and ask for it," Eli said. Clara looked at the building down the street. She looked at her hands. "No," Clara said, "we cannot ask. But I know how to get into rooms where men think they are safe." They waited until midnight. Clara used a hairpin and her small knife to pick the service entrance lock. It took 10 seconds. "Stay here," she whispered to Eli. "You are too big. You walk like a rancher." "I walk like a ghost." She slipped inside. The kitchen was dark. She moved through the shadows, her feet silent on the floorboards. She climbed the back stairs. "Sweet A." She pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. She picked the lock and slipped inside. The room was opulent. A heavy four-poster bed, a desk, a large iron safe in the corner. Pike was not in the bed. Clara moved to the safe. She checked the desk, the hollow of a false book on the shelf. Nothing. Then she saw Pike's dinner jacket hanging on the chair. She patted the pockets. Her fingers brushed cold metal. A key on a chain. She went to the safe. The key fit. The heavy door swung open. Inside, stacked among bundles of paper, was a black leather book. She grabbed it. She opened it to a random page. Judge Holloway, $500. Sheriff Miller, $200. "Got you," she whispered. The door to the hallway opened. Clara froze. Harlan Pike stood in the doorway. He was holding a candle. "Well," Pike said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly calm, "I was wondering when you would try." Clara did not hesitate. She threw the heavy ledger at the candle. The candle flew. Darkness engulfed the room. Clara dove for the door. Pike lunged, grabbing her skirt. She kicked backward, her heel connecting with his shin. He grunted and let go. She scrambled into the hallway. "Thief!" Pike roared. "Guards!" Clara sprinted for the back stairs. She burst out the back door into the alley. "Run!" she screamed at Eli. They scrambled onto their horses. A gunshot cracked the air, the bullet chipping the brick inches from Eli's head. They tore out of the alley, hooves striking sparks on the cobblestones. "They will follow," Eli shouted. "The sheriff will deputize a posse." "We have the book," Clara yelled back. "We cannot go back to town. They will arrest us before we see the judge. We have to get to the ranch. We have rifles. We can hold them off." It was desperate logic. The ranch was a trap, but it was their trap. They rode through the night, pushing the horses to their limit. By the time the sun rose, they were crossing the boundary line of the Concade claim. They pulled up in the yard, the horses blowing hard. "We made it," Clara gasped, sliding from the saddle. Eli jumped down and hauled her up. "Inside now. We have to barricade the windows." He looked back at the horizon. Two dust clouds, one from the east, Pike's riders, one from the north. The sheriff's posse. They were coming from both sides. Eli dragged Clara into the house and slammed the heavy oak door. He dropped the bar into place with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. "Load the rifles." Eli drove long iron nails into thick oak planks, sealing the windows. He overturned the kitchen table, creating a barricade facing the front entrance. Clara laid out the ammunition on a clean towel, 40 rifle rounds, 12 for the shotgun, 6 in each pistol. Clara hid the black ledger under a loose floorboard near the hearth. "If they burn the house," Eli said, "the book goes too. If they burn the house," Clara said, "we will be dead, and the book will not matter." The sound of hooves filled the yard, then silence, then a voice. "Concade," Pike called. "There is no need for this ugliness." Clara looked through a slit in the window boards. Pike sat on a massive black horse 50 yards from the porch. Behind him, a posse of 20 men. "Surrender her," Pike called. "Give me the items she stole from my safe. Do that and you keep your land. You have my word. Your word is worth nothing," Eli shouted back. "And the warrant is a lie. Think about it, son," Pike said. "You are a rancher. You belong here. Do not throw your life away for a saloon girl who is dragging you down to hell. Send her out. We will treat her fairly." Inside the dark house, Clara leaned against the wall. The words seeped into her. "Saloon girl, dragging you down." She looked at Eli. "Eli," she whispered. "He is right." Eli turned to her. "If I go out there, if I give them the book, you survive. You keep the ranch. You can rebuild. I am poison to you." Eli walked to her. He took her face in his hands. He forced her to look at him. "Listen to me," he said fiercely. "Before you came here, I was not living. I was hiding. I was a ghost on my own land, terrified of my own shadow." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "You did not ruin my life, Clara. You woke it. You made me a man who stands up. If you go out that door, you take my life with you. I would rather die with you in this house than live 100 years without you." "Okay," she breathed. "We stay." "Pike," Eli shouted, "go to hell." "Open fire," Sheriff Miller shouted. The world exploded. Bullets slammed into the heavy timber walls. Window boards splintered. Eli fired. He worked the lever of the Winchester with a mechanical rhythm. Clara was on her knees behind the overturned table with the shotgun. A shadow fell across the crack beneath the door. Someone was on the porch. She pulled the trigger. The buckshot blew a hole through the door panel. A scream of pain erupted from the other side. "They are flanking," Eli shouted. "Watch the back." Clara scrambled to the bedroom door. The back window was bowing inward. Someone was using a sledgehammer. Eli fired blindly through the wall. The hammering stopped, but the front was overwhelmed. A bullet tore through the sleeve of Eli's shirt, leaving a line of red. Silas Vance appeared at the gap in the front window, leveling a pistol at Eli's exposed back. Clara saw him. She did not think. She did not calculate. She lunged across the room, grabbed Eli's belt, and yanked him backward. "Down!" she shrieked. Eli fell back just as Vance fired. The bullet buried itself in the log wall exactly where Eli's heart had been. From the floor, Clara raised her pistol. She aimed at the gap where Vance's face was. She fired. Vance grunted and disappeared from the window, clutching his shoulder. "You hit him," Eli gasped. "I aimed for the shoulder," Clara said, her voice trembling. "Survival, Eli, not murder." The firing outside suddenly changed. It was not directed at the house anymore. Shouts of confusion erupted from the yard. "Hold fire!" Pike's voice screamed. "Hold fire!" Eli and Clara looked at each other. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. Eli crawled to the window. He peered out. "My God," he breathed. A new group of riders had entered the yard. At the lead was Marcus Thorne, and beside him, wearing a badge that caught the sunlight, was a federal marshal. But it was not just them. Behind the lawmen rode a dozen men from Red Rock. The blacksmith, the owner of the livery stable, men who had stood silent for months. They held shotguns and hunting rifles. and their barrels were pointed at Pike's mercenaries. "Drop your weapons," the marshal bellowed. By order of the United States District Court, Sheriff Miller looked at Pike, then at the marshal. He dropped his gun in the dirt. One by one, the hired guns lowered their rifles. Pike sat on his horse, his face a mask of purple rage. He was alone in the center of the yard, stripped of his army. Eli kicked the barricade away from the door. He threw the bolt and stepped out onto the porch. Clara followed him. "It is over, Pike," Eli said. Thorne rode forward, waving papers. "Judge Atherton signed the order this morning. Pike, your assets are frozen pending a federal investigation into racketeering, land fraud, and murder. The witness you thought you scared off, Molly, she did not run. She came to my office last night." Pike looked at Thorne, then at Eli. His eyes were wild, devoid of reason. "You think a piece of paper stops me?" Pike snarled. "I built this valley. I own this earth." He reached into his saddlebag. He did not pull a gun. He pulled a glass bottle with a rag stuffed in the neck. Kerosene. He struck a match on his saddle horn. "If I cannot have it," Pike screamed, "no one will." He hurled the bottle. It sailed over Eli's head and smashed against the dry, weathered wood of the barn. The explosion of flame was instant. The dry timber caught like paper. A wall of fire roared up the side of the structure. "The horses!" Clara screamed. "They are trapped." Eli did not hesitate. He handed his rifle to Clara and ran toward the burning building. Eli reached the barn doors. The heat blistered his skin. He threw the latch and heaved the doors open. Smoke billowed out, black and choking. The horses, terrified and screaming, bolted out of the inferno, nearly trampling him. Eli dove to the side. The roof groaned. He scrambled up and looked back at the yard. Pike had not escaped. His horse had reared at the sudden roar of the fire, throwing him. He was scrambling in the dust, reaching for his dropped pistol. Eli walked toward him. He did not run. He walked with a terrifying, slow purpose. The heat of the burning barn was at his back, casting a long dancing shadow before him. Pike grabbed the gun. He rolled onto his back, aiming at Eli. "Stop!" the marshal shouted. But Eli was closer. He reached Pike before the man could fire. He kicked the gun out of Pike's hand. Eli reached down and grabbed Pike by the lapels of his expensive coat. He hauled the older man to his feet as if he were made of straw. Eli pulled back his fist. Every instinct in his blood screamed at him to strike, to smash this man's face until it was nothing but ruin, to kill the threat. Pike flinched, closing his eyes, waiting for the blow. Eli held the fist in the air. His arm trembled. The veins in his neck stood out like cords. The fire roared behind him, consuming the labor of his life. He looked at Pike's pathetic, fear-twisted face. He looked at the marshal. He looked at Clara, who stood on the porch, her hands pressed to her mouth. Eli lowered his hand. He shoved Pike backward hard. Pike stumbled and fell into the dirt at the marshal's feet. "I am not you," Eli said. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. "I do not kill for pride. Take him." The marshal stepped forward and hauled Pike up, slapping cuffs on his wrists. It was over. But the cost was high. The barn was a skeleton of flame. The roof collapsed with a crash that shook the ground. The winter feed was gone. The tack was gone. Eli stood watching it burn. His shoulders slumped. Clara ran to him. She slammed into his chest, wrapping her arms around him. "You are alive," she sobbed. "You are alive." Eli held her. He buried his face in her hair. "We lost the barn," he whispered. "We lost the tools. We kept the house," Clara said, pulling back to look at him. "We kept the land, and we kept us." She took his face in her hands. "I choose you," Eli concade. "With a barn or without it. Rich or poor, I am still here." "I am still here," Eli repeated. He leaned down and kissed her. Behind them, the townfolk were beginning to form a bucket brigade from the creek, trying to keep the fire from spreading to the house. The community was returning. Spring arrived not with a gentle blooming, but with a violent thaw. The snow melted in days, turning the dry creek beds into roaring torrents. The legal victory came with the mud. Harlan Pike had been convicted of fraud, racketeering, and attempted murder. He was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. His assets were seized. The water rights to the upper creek were fully restored to the Concade claim. "It is over," Eli said, reading the letter at the kitchen table. The water is ours. The land is secure. Clara sat across from him, mending a shirt. It is strange, she said, to wake up and not be afraid. We earned it, Eli said. 2 weeks later, they found him in the loft of the new barn they were raising. He was a boy, no more than 14. He was curled up in a corner, shivering under a horse blanket. Eli found him when he went to toss down feed. The boy scrambled back, eyes wide with terror. Easy, Eli said, raising his hands. I am not going to hurt you. I was just sleeping, the boy said. I did not steal nothing. I believe you. It is cold outside. Are you hungry? His name was Leo. The town had run him off because he was mixed heritage. Part Crow, part white. In this part of the country, that meant he belonged nowhere. We need a hand, Eli said. We are rebuilding the barn. It is hard work. Pay is $5 a month and a room in the bunkhouse once it is built. Leo stared at him. You are hiring me? If you work, I do not care about your blood. Leo, I care about your back and your word. Leo looked at Clara. She smiled warmly. We have plenty of food, she said, and we could use the help. Leo stayed, and in taking him in, the love that Eli and Clara had built between them stopped being a fortress and became a shelter. One evening in April, the wind kicked up, rattling the shutters. Clara was asleep, but the noise dragged her into a nightmare. She was back in the saloon. Pike was there. The rope was around her neck. She woke up screaming, thrashing in the sheets. Clara, Clara, Eli was there instantly. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest. I am here, he rumbled. You are in the ranch house. The door is locked. Pike is in prison. I am here. Clara gasped, clutching his arms. I thought he was back. He is gone, Eli said. He kept repeating it, a steady chant. He is gone. You are safe. The grass is green. The creek is running. I am holding you. Slowly the terror receded. Does it ever go away? She whispered in the dark. I do not know, Eli admitted, but you do not have to carry it alone when it comes. He stroked her hair until her breathing evened out. He was her anchor, not because he was fearless, but because he knew the shape of her fear and did not judge it. One evening in May, Clara rode to the high ridge overlooking the southern pass. She held a small bundle, the dried flower from her wedding bouquet, the ribbon she had worn the night she left the border town. She walked to the edge of the drop-off. I did it, Clara said aloud. I told them, Sarah. I told the judge. I told the town. They know what he did to you. She waited. There was only silence, but it was a clean silence. I am not running anymore. I have a home. I have a man who sees me. I am not just a survivor. I am living. She placed the flower and the ribbon under a heavy stone. When she turned back to her horse, she felt lighter, as if she had set down a pack she had not realized she was carrying. Eli, too, had ghosts to lay to rest. At the livery stable, an old man named Jeb was selling him hay. You drive a hard bargain, Concade, Jeb grunted. Just like your daddy. Eli stood tall. He looked Jeb in the eye. I have his shoulders, Eli said calmly, but I do not have his hands. My hands build fences. They do not break men for pride. Jeb looked at him. Really looked at him. No, Jeb admitted. No, I suppose you do not. You did good with Pike, son. Your daddy would have shot him dead and burned the town down to do it. I am not my father, Eli said. I am Eli Concade. He walked out of the stable, leaving the shadow of his father in the dust where it belonged. The story ends on the porch. It was dusk. The sky was a riot of orange and violet. The air was cool, smelling of the creek and the cattle. Eli sat in the rocking chair. Clara sat on the railing, leaning back against the post. Leo was down by the corral, playing a harmonica. The lonely, sweet notes drifted up to them. Eli reached out his hand. Clara took it. Her hand was rough, calloused, scarred from the wire and the woodwork. His hand was large, the knuckles swollen from the cold. They were not perfect hands. They were hands that had known violence and fear. They were hands that had dug graves and built fences. It is a hard country, Clara said, looking out at the darkening hills. It is, Eli agreed. He squeezed her fingers. But it is ours. Clara looked at him. She saw the lines around his eyes, the gray starting to show in his temples. She saw the man who had saved her, and the man she had saved in return. "I am glad I got off that stagecoach," she said softly. "I am glad you did too," Eli said. They sat there as the stars began to punch through the twilight, hand in hand. Two survivors who had walked through the fire and found that the only thing that did not burn was love. Thank you for listening to the story of Eli and Clara. It has been a journey through the dust, the danger, and the quiet redemption of the American West. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe so you do not miss our next adventure. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. Until next time, keep your fences strong and your hearts open.